My brothers and sister always acted like they were better than me, and after being excluded from all of their weddings, I decided they wouldn't be welcome at mine either. What happened next absolutely stunned them. Hey, I'm Samantha, the youngest out of 5 kids. My siblings, Brandon, Derek, Lindsay, and Evan, were so much older than me that it honestly felt like I belonged to a whole different family sometimes. By the time I was old enough to even start remembering anything, they were already heading off to college, moving into apartments, or building their own lives. I always felt like the little tag-along they had to tolerate rather than a real part of the group. Still, even with all that distance between us, I adored them. Being the baby of the family, you naturally look up to your older brothers and sister like they're these larger-than-life heroes. When I was little, I truly believed Brandon could do no wrong. Brandon was the oldest and the coolest in my eyes, like some rock star who could fix anything. Derek was more serious and quiet, but that just made me want to impress him even more. Lindsay was everything I wanted to be, my glamorous big sister. I dreamed of the day she'd pull me into her world and teach me all the secrets about growing up. And then there was Evan, the youngest of the older bunch, who was a little closer to me in age, but even he kept me at a distance like I was still just a little kid. The first time it really sank in that I wasn't important to them was at Brandon's wedding. I was just 9 years old back then. Nine's that tricky age where you feel like you're grown enough to be part of important events but still young enough that adults don't take you seriously. So when Brandon and his fiancée Holly announced they were having a child-free wedding, it never crossed my mind that they meant me too. I mean, come on, I wasn't some random kid who'd run around screaming or throw food at the tables. I was his little sister. I remember it so clearly, the day my parents sat me down to break the news. I was bouncing with excitement, even asking my mom if I could borrow one of her fancy necklaces for the occasion. That's when she hit me with it. Brandon and Holly are having an adults-only wedding, Sam. You won't be able to come. I just sat there for a minute trying to wrap my head around it. But I'm not like other kids, I pleaded with her. I'll sit quietly, I swear. She just patted me on the head like I was some cute little dog and said, "It's just for adults, sweetie. You'll understand when you're older." But I didn't understand. Not even a little bit. I ended up crying alone in my room for hours. I wanted so badly to be there, to watch Brandon get married, to see Holly walk down the aisle and officially become my sister. But instead, I stayed home with a babysitter, staring at the clock and imagining all the moments I was missing. When Brandon got back from his honeymoon, I thought maybe, just maybe, he'd say something, some little apology, or at least tell me a funny story from the wedding. But he didn't even bring it up. It was like I hadn't even existed that day. 2 years later, Derek got engaged. I was 11 by then, and I was sure this time would be different. I had grown up a little, I was more mature, quieter, and went out of my way to be as well-behaved as possible. I made sure everyone noticed too. So when the adults-only rule came up again, I thought for sure they'd make an exception for me. But nope. I got the same old speech. Derek and his fiancée want a child-free wedding, Sam. It's not personal, they said. Not personal? It sure felt personal to me. How could it not, when it was happening all over again? I didn't break down this time. I was older, trying to be more composed. I just sat there, listening while my parents made excuse after excuse. My mom even tried to comfort me, saying, "You'll have your own wedding one day, and it'll be wonderful. You'll see." But honestly, her words didn't help at all. That was when I started to really understand the truth. My siblings didn't see me the way I saw them. To them, I wasn't part of the family in the same way. By the time Lindsay got engaged, I was 14 years old, a full-blown teenager desperate to feel like I belonged. At first, Lindsay didn't even plan on banning kids from her wedding. She actually wanted everyone to come. But as usual, the family stuck their noses in. Aunts and uncles started saying things like, "It's so much better when there aren't a bunch of kids running around causing chaos, and a kid-free wedding is just so much more peaceful." Eventually, Lindsay gave in to the pressure. She decided no one under 17 would be allowed. I was 14, so close it stung. I went straight to Lindsay, trying to plead my case. "Can I please be an exception? I'm your sister. I'll be quiet, I promise." She gave me this really serious look and said, "If I make an exception for you, Sam, then what about all the other kids? It wouldn't be fair." Fair? Are you kidding me? I completely lost it. I started shouting, "It's not fair that I've been banned from all of your weddings. I'm not just some random kid, I'm your sister." That's when my parents stepped in. I ended up getting grounded for half a year after that blow-up with Lindsay for disrespecting her and stirring up drama, as my parents put it. 3 whole months. Most of that time I was stuck in my room, stewing in my anger and feeling like the hurt would never go away. By the time Evan announced he was getting married, I was 16 and honestly, I didn't even bother hoping. I already knew what was coming. Sure enough, the big announcement included the same tired line, child-free wedding. At that point, it didn't even faze me anymore. I didn't cry, didn't yell, didn't even bother asking why. I just nodded and accepted it for what it was. But what really cut deep? Finding out that my cousin Brianna, who had literally just turned 19, was invited. I heard it secondhand through the family gossip chain. Apparently, 18 was the magic number that made someone adult enough to get an invite. Brianna and I were only a few months apart, but somehow she was old enough and I wasn't. The irony was almost laughable. When my parents later asked why I hadn't made a big fuss congratulating Evan, I just shrugged it off. I shot him a quick text, "Congrats. Hope it's a great day," and then, like always, I locked myself away in my room. By that point, I'd started checking out emotionally. It was painfully clear to me that I didn't really matter to them, not in the way a little sister should matter. I was more like a background character in their lives, a kid they barely even remembered existed. And God, it hurt. It hurt more than I could ever put into words. After Evan's wedding, years just kind of slid by. I stopped trying to wedge myself into their lives, stopped chasing after something they were never willing to give me. I was exhausted from always being the outsider, exhausted from always being the one who was easy to leave behind. By the time I met Logan, my now fiancé, I had pretty much given up expecting anything from my family. Logan was the first person who really listened when I opened up about my family. I still remember sitting on his old couch, telling him how I'd been left out of not one, but 3 weddings, and the look on his face was priceless. "Wait, they didn't invite you?" he said, shocked. "Not even when you were like 14. "Nope," I said, trying to act like it didn't bother me anymore. He just sat there shaking his head, looking completely disgusted. "That's seriously messed up," he said flatly. And that's when it really clicked for me, it was messed up. I had spent so many years convincing myself that it was just normal, that it was no big deal, that child-free weddings were a reasonable excuse. But it wasn't reasonable. It wasn't normal. 3 different times, my siblings had the choice to include me, and 3 times they decided I didn't matter. So when Logan and I got engaged a few years later, I knew without a doubt, my wedding was going to be different. It was going to be a celebration filled with people who actually gave a damn about me, people who loved me and wanted to share my happiness. And that's when I made the call. I wasn't inviting my siblings. There wasn't any dramatic announcement or angry rant. No big letter posted in the group chat. No confrontation. I just quietly left their names off the guest list. Simple. Clean. I knew it would stir up drama eventually, but honestly, I figured I'd deal with it when the time came. The first warning sign came about 2 months before the wedding. My mom randomly called me one afternoon, sounding way too cheerful for it to be innocent. I should have known something was up immediately. "So Sam," she said in that sugary sweet tone she only used when she was about to ask for something, "how are all the wedding plans coming along?" I answered carefully, "Good. Almost everything's done." "That's wonderful," she chirped, and then there was this little pause before she casually added, "Your brothers and sister haven't gotten their invitations yet." My stomach dropped. This was the conversation I had been dreading. "Yeah, I sent them out," I said, trying my best to sound casual. She didn't skip a beat. "Well, they didn't get one. Maybe it got lost in the mail." I let out a long sigh. "Mom, I didn't invite them." Silence. Just dead, heavy silence on the other end. And then she exploded. "What, Sam? How could you not invite your own family? Your siblings? What is wrong with you?" I gripped the phone tight, trying to stay calm. "They didn't invite me to a single one of their weddings, Mom. Not one. So yeah, I'm just returning the favor. It's only fair." She acted like I had committed some terrible crime. "That was different, Sam. You were young. They didn't mean to hurt you." I let out a bitter little laugh. "Well, it hurt anyway. And I'm done pretending it didn't." That was her cue to launch straight into the guilt trip. "Sam, you're being spiteful. Family is family. You can't just shut them out. What will people think?" Ah, there it was. What will people think? My mom's favorite song on repeat. I cut her off before she could wind up even more. "I don't care what people think, Mom. This is my wedding, and I'm inviting the people who actually care about me. They didn't care enough to include me in their big days, so why should they get a free pass to mine?" She hung up on me. I wasn't the least bit surprised. That night, the family group chat blew up. It started with Lindsay, fake as always. "Hey Sam, did something happen with the mail? We didn't get our invites yet." Then Derek, blunt and straight to the point. "What's going on? Why aren't we invited?" I stared at my phone for a long time, just debating whether to even answer. Part of me wanted to spell it out for them, every little piece of the hurt they had caused over the years. But deep down, I knew trying to explain myself would be a waste of breath. They never understood before, and they weren't about to start now. So I didn't respond. I just left the family group chat on read and went about my evening. Logan noticed I was quiet during dinner and asked what was going on. I handed him my phone so he could see the messages for himself. He just shook his head. "You don't owe them anything, Sam," he said firmly. "They made their choices. You're just living with the results." "Yeah, but..." I trailed off, picking at my food. "They're gonna make me out to be the villain, I just know it." "Let them," Logan said without hesitation. "You know the truth. That's all that matters." The very next day, my parents showed up at my townhouse without warning. The second I opened the door, I could tell what they were there for. My mom practically barged in, her face stormy with anger. "What are you thinking, Sam? Not inviting your own brothers and sister to your wedding? Who does that?" I clenched my jaw and tried to stay calm, even though my patience was hanging by a thread. "Mom, I already explained. They didn't think I was important enough to include in their weddings, so I'm not including them in mine." My dad, who had been standing silently until now, finally spoke up, his tone sharp. "You're being childish, Sam. You're holding on to things that happened a long time ago." And that was it. I snapped. "I was a child back then, Dad. I begged to be included in their weddings, and they slammed the door in my face every single time." My voice shook with all the years of bottled-up anger. Don't talk to me about being childish when I was the one crying at home, while they all celebrated without me. They didn't have a comeback. My mom's eyes filled with tears, but for once I didn't let it get to me. "You can keep making excuses for them if you want, but I'm done pretending like it's okay," I said firmly. If they had cared, they would have shown it when it actually mattered. Without another word, they stormed out, furious and defeated. Over the next few days, the messages from my siblings got nastier by the hour. Derek flat out called me selfish. Lindsay accused me of tearing the family apart. And Evan? He didn't even sugarcoat it. "You're being petty, Sam. Grow up." I didn't reply to any of it. I didn't feel the need to explain myself anymore. Not after everything. One night, while I was scrolling through all their hateful messages, Logan wrapped his arms around me and said softly, "I'm proud of you, you know, for standing your ground." And for the first time in my life, I actually felt proud of myself too. After the initial explosion, I thought the drama would fizzle out eventually. I figured they'd vent to each other, whine to some cousins, and then move on just like they always did whenever something didn't go their way. But I severely underestimated how far they would take it this time. Started off small. Lindsay, of course, couldn't resist taking it public. She posted some passive-aggressive status on Facebook. "Family is forever." Even when some people forget what that word means. I rolled my eyes so hard I thought they might get stuck. Sitting beside me, Logan was scrolling through his own feed. When I showed him Lindsay's post, he just snorted. "What is she, 14 years old?" he muttered. "Basically," I said under my breath, trying to laugh it off. I kept telling myself it didn't matter, that I knew the truth, that I wasn't the villain they were trying to paint me as, but it still stung. It's hard not to feel hurt when your own sister goes out of her way to publicly take jabs at you. And it didn't stop there. A few days later, little digs started popping up in the extended family group chat, the one I'd muted months ago. Logan was the one who noticed. He checked his phone one afternoon and said, Sam, you might want to look at this." When I opened the chat, it was a full-on pity party. Lindsay had written, "It's so heartbreaking when family members let bitterness win over love." Derek chimed in with, "I thought we were better than this." And Brandon, in his usual "I'm the wise older brother" fashion, threw in his 2 cents. "I never realized how much resentment you've been carrying, Sam. It's sad you're throwing away relationships over something so old." My hands were shaking as I read the messages, rage bubbling up inside me. They still didn't get it. They made it sound like I was holding a grudge over something tiny, like I hadn't spent my whole life being left out and ignored by them. I wanted so badly to answer, to list out every time they excluded me, every birthday, every wedding, every family event where I was treated like an afterthought. But deep down, I knew it was pointless. They'd just twist my words, accuse me of being dramatic, call me unstable, whatever it took to avoid taking responsibility. So instead, I did the one thing they never would have seen coming. I left the group chat. That night, my mom called. And from the second I picked up, she was already yelling. "Sam, what is wrong with you?" "Hi, Mom," I said flatly. "Don't you start with that attitude," she snapped back. "Do you even realize what you've done? Your brothers and sister are devastated. You're tearing this family apart." Devastated? I actually laughed. They ignored me my whole childhood, Mom. Now suddenly they're heartbroken? Give me a break. You're being so spiteful, she shot back. You've always been like this, holding on to grudges, making everything about you. That was the final straw. You think I'm the one holding grudges? Mom, I was 10 when Brandon got married. 10. I cried because I just wanted to be there, and you all made it crystal clear that I didn't matter. And it didn't just happen once, I continued, my voice shaking with the force of everything I had bottled up. It happened over and over again. I begged to go to Lindsay's wedding, and she told me no because it wouldn't be fair. That was so long ago, she said dismissively. Yeah, I snapped, and guess what? I'm still living with the scars you all left behind. You all decided a long time ago that I wasn't worth including. Why should you all suddenly get front row seats to my life now? She had no answer for that. Instead, she tried to twist things around like she always did. This isn't about the weddings, Sam, she said sharply. This is about you pushing everyone away because you're bitter. Logan's probably putting ideas in your head, isn't he? I groaned loudly. Mom, stop dragging Logan into this. He has nothing to do with it. I took a deep breath and said calmly, this is about me finally understanding that I deserve better than being treated like I don't matter. Her voice softened, trying to slip into that concerned mother act she loved pulling out. Sam, you don't get it. When everything's said and done, family is all you'll have. Friends and partners? They come and go. But your family is forever. I shook my head, my voice steady. No, Mom. Family is supposed to care about you. They're supposed to lift you up, not tear you down. And that's not what you've been to me. That was when the waterworks started, loud, dramatic sobs that had more to do with guilt tripping me than any real sadness. You'll regret this someday, Sam, she cried into the phone. You'll see. I spoke quietly, but with a certainty I hadn't felt before. I don't think I will. Then I hung up. The following week was like something out of a bad soap opera. I ended up blocking Lindsay and Derek on social media because I couldn't take their constant passive-aggressive posts and nasty comments. Mom even tried calling Logan twice, probably hoping she could guilt trip him too. He didn't answer either time. Then, out of nowhere, Brandon sent me this ridiculously long email. Yes, a real email, lecturing me about forgiveness and family unity. He even threw in a Bible verse about letting go of anger. I didn't even bother replying. One night, Logan and I sat on the couch, and I just unloaded everything onto him. It's like they refused to see what they did, I said, voice thick with frustration. They're acting like I'm the villain when all I did was finally stand up for myself. They treated me like I was invisible for years, and now they're losing it because I'm setting boundaries. Logan leaned back and said something that hit me right between the eyes. They're not mad because they're not invited. They're mad because they can't control you anymore. Hearing him say it out loud felt like a gut punch. He was absolutely right. My whole life, my family had acted like I was just some background character they could ignore when it suited them. But now that I was doing something on my terms, something they couldn't influence, they didn't know how to handle it. They'll get over it eventually, I said, though honestly, I wasn't totally sure if I believed it. Logan shrugged and smiled a little. Maybe they will. Maybe they won't. But either way, it's not your problem. And he was right again. That was the moment it really sank in. I didn't owe my family anything. Not my time. Not my attention. And definitely not a spot at my wedding. A few days later, my dad sent me a text dripping with guilt. Sam, your mom isn't doing well. She's really upset about all this. Maybe you could reconsider. I stared at the message for a long time. Finally, I typed back, maybe she should have thought about that before treating me like I didn't matter for all those years. I hit send, then blocked his number without a second thought. For the first time in what felt like forever, I felt truly free. The weeks leading up to the wedding were this weird mix of pure excitement and underlying tension. On one hand, I was over the moon happy to finally be marrying Logan, the love of my life, and having the day I dreamed of since I was a little girl. On the other hand, there was still that lingering drama with my family, like a dark cloud trying to hang over a sunny day. My parents stopped trying to call me directly after I blocked my mom's number following her meltdown. But that didn't stop other relatives from sticking their noses in. One afternoon, my phone rang. It was my Aunt Linda, someone I hadn't spoken to in literal years. The second I saw her name pop up, I knew it wasn't going to be a friendly call. I picked up and sure enough, she wasted no time getting to the point. "Sam, honey, I just don't understand why you're making such a big deal out of this," she said in that fake sweet voice that made my skin crawl. "Family is family. You shouldn't leave your brothers and sister out of your wedding." I gripped the phone tighter and took a slow, deep breath. "Aunt Linda," I said, keeping my voice as calm as I could, "this isn't just about a wedding. This has been building for years. I'm not changing my mind. But it's family," she pushed, like that one word was supposed to erase years of hurt. "I'm sure they didn't mean to hurt you back then," she said. "Can't you just let it go and be the bigger person?" I closed my eyes for a moment, willing myself not to explode. "Being the bigger person doesn't mean letting people treat you like a doormat," I said, voice firm. "It means knowing when enough is enough." There was a long, heavy pause on her end. Then came the dramatic sigh. "Well, I just hope you don't regret this someday, Sam. One day you'll miss your family and they won't be there." I didn't even respond. I just ended the call and tossed my phone onto the couch. The morning of the wedding finally arrived and I woke up with this strange mix of calm and nervousness. It wasn't the usual wedding day jitters either, it was more like I was waiting for something bad to happen, like I was on high alert. Even though I knew none of them were invited, part of me couldn't shake the fear that they'd find some way to crash the day. But Logan, being the incredible man he is, wasn't about to let that happen. When I mentioned my worries as we were getting ready separately, he just smiled and said, "Sam, today's about us. Nothing else matters. If anyone even thinks about ruining it, I'll personally walk them out." Hearing him say that made me laugh out loud, and for the first time in weeks, a heavy weight lifted off my chest. The venue we picked couldn't have been more perfect. It was this cozy little garden, wrapped in colorful flowers, with twinkle lights strung through the trees and a sweet gazebo where Logan and I would say, "I do." I never dreamed of some huge, fancy wedding. All I ever wanted was something real, something full of warmth and love, and that's exactly what it felt like. My dearest friends were there, along with a few relatives who had always treated me with kindness. It felt right, like it was exactly where I was meant to be. As I stood in front of the mirror adjusting my dress, Jenna, my maid of honor and my best friend, walked into the room and beamed at me. "You look incredible, Sam," she said, her eyes sparkling. "Thanks," I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. It hit me harder than I expected. Jenna sat down on the arm of the couch and watched me for a minute before asking, "Are you okay?" I paused, struggling to find the words, then nodded slowly. "Yeah. I don't know. Sad, I guess." "Not about today," I added quickly. "Today is perfect. It's about everything else. About my family not being here." She leaned forward, her expression soft. "Sam, it's okay to feel that," she said gently. "Just because you know you made the right decision doesn't mean it doesn't hurt." Those words cracked something open inside me. I turned toward her, blinking back tears. "I wanted them to care," I said, my voice breaking. "I wanted them to fight for me when I was a kid. And they never did." Jenna stood up and hugged me tight. "You don't need their approval," she whispered. "You're surrounded by people who love you. That's what matters today." I nodded, wiping my eyes and taking a deep, steadying breath. She was right. Today wasn't about who didn't show up, it was about Logan and me and the life we were starting together. When the ceremony finally began, I was so swept up in the magic of it all that I didn't think about anything else. I stood at the start of the aisle, looking at Logan and thought this right here is what real happiness feels like. As I walked toward him, I felt this incredible sense of peace wash over me. I wasn't that forgotten little sister anymore. I wasn't the girl who had to beg to be included. I was a bride loved, supported, and finally standing where I belonged. Our vows were perfect. Logan promised to love and protect me for the rest of our lives, and I made the same promises to him. By the time we exchanged rings and said "I do," there wasn't a dry eye in the entire garden, including mine. The reception afterward was everything I had dreamed about. We laughed, we ate too much, and we danced until our feet hurt. Our friends gave the sweetest toasts, filled with funny stories and heartfelt wishes. Logan's parents, who had always made me feel so loved, pulled me aside and said how proud they were to have me as part of their family. At one point during the night, I slipped away from the crowd just to soak it all in. I stood at the edge of the garden, looking out at the sparkling lights, the laughter, the hugs, and I felt so full I thought my heart might burst. For so long I had believed the lies my family had fed me, that I didn't matter, that I wasn't enough. But standing there, surrounded by people who genuinely loved me, I realized something huge. I mattered to the people who deserved to know me. Later that night, as things were winding down, one of my cousins came up to me. "Hey Sam," she said, looking a little uncomfortable. "I probably shouldn't tell you this, but..." I groaned. "What now?" She looked sheepish. "Your mom and Lindsay apparently threw a little dinner tonight, like a sad replacement for your wedding." I stared at her for a second and then burst out laughing. "You're kidding," I said. She shook her head. "I know. It's pathetic." I just kept laughing, shaking my head. Let them have their pity party. I hope the food was good. I could tell my cousin expected me to be upset, but honestly, I wasn't. If anything, it just confirmed what I already knew. I had made the right call. They spent my whole life excluding me, treating me like an afterthought. And now, the second I drew a boundary they couldn't cross, they couldn't handle it. At the end of the night, Logan and I had one last slow dance, surrounded by all the people who truly cared about us. As we swayed, I leaned up and whispered, "I'm so happy we did this." He smiled down at me, his eyes full of love. "Me too, Sam. This is just the beginning." And for the first time ever, I believed it with my whole heart. My family wasn't there. They missed the best day of my life. And you know what? That was their loss, not mine. Because as I looked around at the love and the laughter, I realized something I wished I had known all along. Everything I had ever needed was already right in front of me, and it had nothing to do with them. I really thought the worst of it was behind me after the wedding. I thought once the day was over, I'd finally be free. And during that perfect day, I didn't miss my family for a single second. Not once did I wonder what it would have been like if they had been there. Because the truth was, I had everything I needed and more. If there's one thing I've learned about my family, it's that they hate being ignored. It's almost like the idea that I could be happy without them was too much for them to handle. So of course, they had to stir up some drama one last time. It kicked off about a week after the wedding. I got a message from Lindsay, because obviously it had to be Lindsay. She was always the one to throw the first punch when it came to family drama. "Saw some pictures from your wedding. I can't believe you had it in a garden. Looked pretty casual, but I guess that's what you wanted." I just stared at the screen in disbelief. She couldn't even fake being nice for 2 seconds. It wasn't enough for her to just stay out of my life. She had to poke at me, criticize something that had made me genuinely happy. For a moment, I was tempted to fire back with something sharp, something like, "At least my wedding wasn't full of fake smiles and empty gestures." But I stopped myself. I didn't owe her a response. Not anymore. A few days later, the floodgates really opened. Suddenly, distant family members I hadn't heard from in years started popping up in my messages. Apparently, Lindsay, Brandon, and Derek were on a full-blown mission to make me look like the bad guy. Aunt Linda, the one who tried guilt-tripping me before the wedding, sent another message. "Sam, I don't know what's going on between you and your siblings, but they're really hurt. Lindsay says she tried reaching out and you're just ignoring her. Maybe it's time to let go of the past." I rolled my eyes so hard it hurt. How many times was I supposed to explain myself? How many people were they going to drag into this before realizing I wasn't playing their game? Logan noticed the frustrated look on my face and sat down beside me. "Another guilt trip?" he asked, glancing at my phone. "Yeah," I sighed. "Aunt Linda again. She says they're hurt." Logan let out a short, humorless laugh. "They're not hurt because you shut them out. They're hurt because they can't control you anymore." I smiled a little at that. He wasn't wrong. "I just don't get it," I said quietly. "They ignored me for so long. I begged to be included in their lives, and they slammed the door every single time. Now suddenly, I'm the villain because I'm protecting myself." Logan nodded. "That's how it always goes. The moment you put up a boundary, the people who benefited from you having none are the first to cry about it." And boy, he couldn't have been more right. The real low point came a few days later. It was a lazy Sunday. Logan and I were in our pajamas, messing around in the kitchen, trying and failing to make pancakes without burning them. We were laughing when there was a knock at the door. I froze instantly. Somehow, I just knew. Sure enough, when I opened it, there was my mom, standing there with her arms crossed and her "we need to talk" face on full display. "Sam," she said, her voice dripping with disappointment. "We need to talk." I sighed heavily. Mom, now really isn't a good time. But she didn't care. She pushed the door open slightly like she was going to force her way inside. Logan appeared behind me, his hand landing gently but firmly on my shoulder. Sam, please, she said, her voice pleading now. This has gone too far. Your siblings are devastated. Devastated? I clenched my jaw, working hard to stay calm. You don't get to come here and lecture me, Mom, I said steadily. I invited the people who actually cared about me to my wedding. They didn't make the cut. That's on them, not me. Her face twisted into that familiar look of disbelief, like she couldn't even comprehend me standing up for myself. You don't mean that, she said, her voice cracking. They love you, Sam. They're your family. No, Mom, I said, my voice stronger now. Family doesn't make you feel small. Family doesn't abandon you when you're a kid and then expect a front row seat when it's convenient for them. I spent years trying to prove to them, and to you, that I mattered. And none of you ever cared. I'm done. She blinked, stunned into silence. For once, she didn't have a comeback ready. Logan stepped forward, his voice gentle but firm. I think it's time for you to go, he said quietly. My mom looked between the two of us, her face shifting between sadness and anger. You'll regret this, she said, her voice soft and heavy, like she was delivering some kind of warning. You'll miss us one day and we won't be there. I met her gaze without flinching. No, Mom, I said calmly. I won't. Logan quietly closed the door behind her. I stood there for a moment, my heart pounding, bracing for the guilt to hit. But it didn't. All I felt was relief. The next day, I got a text from Derek. Mom said she came by and you slammed the door in her face. Real mature, Sam. I don't even recognize you anymore. I read the message out loud to Logan, who just shook his head. Block him, he said simply. You don't know him anything. So I did. One by one, I blocked every sibling, every cousin, every so-called relative who tried to pile onto the guilt train. That day, something huge clicked inside me. I realized I didn't owe any of them my time. I didn't owe them my peace. I didn't even owe them an explanation. For so many years, they made me feel invisible. But now I was the one in control. The weeks that followed were the quietest, most peaceful ones I'd had in a long, long time. Without the endless guilt trips, nasty texts, and passive-aggressive jabs, it finally felt like I could breathe again. Logan and I threw ourselves into married life, turning our little townhouse into a real home, making plans for the future, and just living without all the extra noise. One evening, we were curled up on the couch, half watching some cheesy rom-com, when Logan turned toward me. Do you regret it? He asked softly. Not having them there? I thought about it for a moment, really thought about it, before shaking my head. No, I said honestly. I thought I might. I really did. But I don't. I smiled a little as I said it. I spent so many years chasing their approval, bending over backwards to be seen, and what did it ever get me? Nothing. I don't miss them. I don't miss feeling like I'm never enough. Logan smiled too and squeezed my hand gently. Good, he said. You deserve so much better. And he was right. I did deserve better. About a month after the wedding, I got one last, desperate message. It came from Lindsay, clearly using a different phone number, since I had already blocked her. Guess she just couldn't help herself. You've destroyed this family, Sam. Hope you're happy. I stared at the screen for a few seconds before quietly hitting delete. I didn't even feel mad. I didn't feel sad either. I just felt done. Because the truth was I was happy. For the first time in my life, I wasn't chasing after people who treated me like an afterthought. I wasn't begging for scraps of love or attention from people who couldn't even be bothered to show up for me. I had built a life surrounded by real love, by people who actually cared about me, and that was more than enough. It always had been.